In this lesson, we will cover creating and editing circuits and adjusting circuit properties. In this model, lighting fixtures have been placed along with some of the electrical devices. At this point, you can begin creating circuits. You can create circuits for power systems along with some low voltage systems, such as data, telephone, and fire alarm. In this lesson, we'll look specifically at power systems. And the important thing to keep in mind is that only compatible devices can be connected. And that means that they have the same distribution system, which is made up of the voltage definition and the number of poles. We can take a quick look at that if we switch to the Systems ribbon, and in the electrical panel we'll click the dialog box launcher, and then we'll look at the distribution systems settings, and you can see that it's made up of the phase configuration, a number of wires, an LL voltage and an LG voltage. And those voltage come from the voltage definitions here, and so there is a minimum and maximum voltage, so there's a range here to make up these voltages. And then once again they can be selected here to make up the distribution system. Now when we take a look at the components that can be added to a circuit, the important thing to keep in mind is that they must have an electrical connector. So I'm going to select this receptacle and click Edit Family, and then when I look at the family I can see the electrical connector here, and when I select it you can see that there is a system type parameter, and so this one is set to power unbalanced, but as I described earlier you can create circuits for several other types of systems such as data, telephone, security, so on. And once again, power is the main one we're focusing on, and the important thing to keep in mind with power circuits is the voltage. And so here's a voltage. All of the electrical connectors will have a voltage parameter, and this one in particular is associated to a family parameter, which is the switch voltage. And so that's where the voltage of this receptacle can be controlled. Okay, so once again, to be added to a circuit it must have an electrical connector, and you need to pay attention to the voltage and the number of poles and the system type for each connector. Okay, we'll close that family and go back to the model, and let's create a circuit for these receptacles. So if I select a receptacle, you can see that in the contextual ribbon there's a Create Systems panel and power is available, and that is due to the electrical connector that we just looked at. When I click power, a circuit is created, and right now that only that single receptacle is added to the circuit. But at this point we can click Edit Circuit and go into Edit Circuit mode, and then there are a couple options here: Add to Circuit and Remove from Circuit. So with Add to Circuit selected, I can begin selecting other receptacles, or even other, once again, other compatible devices that could be on the circuit. So in this case I could add lighting fixtures that are 120 volt. I'm simply going to continue selecting receptacles, and in a minute I'm going to get a warning, and there it is. So now it's telling me that the total connected load for the circuit is exceeding 80% of the defined rating. And so right now the rating for this circuit is set to 20 amps, and I'm exceeding 80% of that capacity, and so Revit's going to warn me of that. So I can select Remove from Circuit, and I'll remove a few of these devices. And so you'll notice that as I'm adding components, as I'm adding these receptacles to the circuit, they're becoming bold, and the ones that are removed, they are now dimmed. And so that will tell me which components have been added to the circuit. Once I have all of the fixtures that I want on this circuit, I can select the panel. There's a drop down, and I can expand that drop down and I can select the panel. or if I wanted to, if it was visible in the view, which in this case it is, I want to assign it to LP1, I can click Select Panel and then select the panel in the drawing area. Once again, I can select it from the drop-down or click Select Panel and then select it. And then once I have that finished, I'll click Finish Editing Circuit, and all of my receptacles that I selected are now added to the circuit. And when I select them, you can see the electrical circuits contextual ribbon, and the ones that I removed, those are obviously no longer on the circuit. Another way to create a circuit is to select those components beforehand. So I'll select a handful of lighting fixtures, and when I do, once again, power is available in the contextual ribbon, and I'll click power, and only the selected devices are added to the circuit. I can select one of the fixtures in the circuit and switch to the electrical circuits contextual ribbon, and I can click Edit Circuit and add additional fixtures if I wanted to. And also be aware that those were added to panel LP1, and that's because panel LP1 was the last panel that I used for a circuit, and so Revit will remember that and continue to add circuits to that panel. And so if you wanted to change that panel, you could do so by expanding that drop down and selecting another panel, and then Revit would use that for the next one. Alright, so we have two circuits created. We added the electrical fixtures and the lighting fixtures to a circuit. Now let's take a look at, we could obviously continue doing that throughout the building. A couple more things I want to cover is we can circuit panels to other panels. So in this case we have panel LP1, and when I select it, the power button appears in the contextual ribbon, and I can create a circuit for that, and we can connect it to the transformer. So I can expand the panel drop down in the contextual ribbon and select the transformer. And then we can do the same thing, create a circuit for our transformer and connect it to panel MDP1. Alright, last note I'll make about circuits is when you're connecting them to panels, and specifically panels to other panels, there's the option to control the connection type, and it can either be through a breaker or feed through lugs. And if you want to use feed through lugs, that option must be enabled. And so just for example, I will copy this panel, and when I select it, I'll click power, and it's set to MDP1. And since the connection, the feed through lugs option was enabled, I can select that for the connection type. So pay attention to that. So just to summarize, the components must be of the same distribution system, and we did not cover panels that they do have a distribution system parameter, so you can control that. And then transformers, they actually have a secondary distribution parameter, and you can control that as well. And so pay attention to the voltage, number of poles, which make up the distribution system, so that you can create circuits.